I will be sitting today because I am suffering from a slight bout of vertigo, so I apologize for that in advance. If I move around a lot, that's just because I'm trying to keep my balance. So yes, thank you. My name is Rachel, and thank you for the introduction, Greg. And I'm a local book artist from the area, from Kalamazoo. So before I talk about my trip, before I talk about bone folders, we have to kind of go back to mid-pandemic days. So like the beginning of 2021. And I don't know about all of you, but I was not having the greatest pandemic. You hear stories about those people who like started their dream business. Yeah, that wasn't me. I was having a bad time. So what does a good millennial that's semi-depressed, what does she do all day long to cope with all of it? Instagram. I was on Instagram copious amounts of the day, a little bit unhealthy, but that's okay. So as I was just panic scrolling, as you do, I came across this image here, and I froze because I instantly knew that these were bone folders, and I had never seen a bone folder look like this before, ever. I had never even thought about them as art themselves. So I really just froze and thought that it was pretty interesting. So what are bone folders? They're a multi-purpose tool, and they're typically made of plastic today, plastic or Teflon. Sometimes they can even be made of wood or stone, but typically it's plastic. And they're pretty plain normally when you buy them from the store. They're very smooth. They're not really meant to be sharp or for tearing or cutting or anything like that. It's really meant to smooth down creases if you fold paper in half, or like when you're putting a cover on a book, smoothing out all the air bubbles or all of the extra glue or anything like that. So you can really use it in a multiple of mediums, not only book arts, but paper arts. You can even use this in ceramics if you felt so inclined. But yeah, it's just a pretty plain Jane utilitarian type object. But if we go back in time, bone folders or bone tools have been used for thousands of years. Our ancient ancestors were pretty hip to figuring that out. And one of the reasons that you use bone is that it lasts a long time. We're still finding bone and antler tools in archaeological sites today. And bones are also very strong. They're strong inside our bodies, they're strong outside of our bodies, and they can be malleable. They can be shaped and sculpted into a tool for a specific purpose. The tools over here, the two ones on the end are pretty sharp and pokey, so that would mean that they were probably used to punch holes in something, maybe for sewing. The two down toward the bottom looks like they were used as scoops, utilizing the hollow part of the bone as like a spoon or a scoop. And if you jump ahead just a little bit in time to the time of the book form that we know today, codex form, bone folders were used then just how we use them today. Use them for folding paper, for attaching covers, and things like that. So it's a very versatile medium, and it's a versatile tool. So back to Instagram. What's great is that I was able to follow through the posts, follow through the clicks, and realize that this was basically an ad for a class to learn how to make these at the Penland School of Craft. Now, out of sheer curiosity, had anyone ever heard of the Penland School of Craft? Have you ever heard of it before? A lot of people. Okay. I didn't know anything about this place. I was very ignorant to the fact that this is one of the top craft schools in the country, and it's located just outside of Asheville in North Carolina. So that I just had no clue about it. And I hadn't done anything fun really related to my artwork in a long time, fun in general because of the pandemic. So I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I have to get this done. This would be great. So I look on their website and I see that they had spaces open. So I'm like, yes, okay, perfect. I can take the class. And then I looked at the price and I'm like, ooh, maybe not. So I checked to see if they had scholarships, and they did. And I'm like, okay, perfect. This is going to be great. I look, when were the scholarships due? Yesterday. So I was a little bit stuck there, and I was like, well, surely I'm a day late. They'll totally let me do it. So I emailed them and I'm like, can I still apply for scholarships? And they very politely were like, oh, honey, no way. No. I just didn't realize the competitive scholarships. It was just a highly competitive field, and they were already spoken for, and then the wait list was already full. So they very gently and very politely said, no way. So I was not going to be able to go all by myself. So that would lead us to the Arts Council. So I would like to take a moment to thank the Arts Council for their support. Otherwise, I would not have been able to go on the trip at all. So this is Penland. Once I got the approval, I bought my plane ticket and I was off to the races. Fun fact about me and about my family, we don't travel well. We usually have something terrible happen along the way, like a flat tire or a delay, or it's canceled altogether because of a disaster or something. So I was just kind of holding my breath this whole trip, waiting for the shoe to drop, and it didn't. And I'm not used to that, you guys. I'm not used to smooth sailing, so that was pretty fun. But Penland they host full immersion workshops, and they can last from a couple of days to a couple of weeks. And when they mean full immersion, they mean full immersion. It's pretty intense. You're in the studio for a lot of the time, which is the whole point anyway. But they have many different offerings, and I made a list of them, which is glass, iron, paper and books, photography, drawing and painting, clay, metals, printmaking and letterpress, textiles, wood, and special subjects. They have state-of-the-art facilities for each of the focuses of medium. So it was very impressive to me once I got there. And my workshop was at the beginning of August of last year and was just 1 week long, which was perfect. This is a photograph of one of the main hubs, one of the main gathering places called the Pines. And this was the cafeteria, it was the mess hall, and it was just a natural place where everyone was socializing and meeting. So it was kind of a whirlwind trip. I got on a bus and then they just kind of plopped me in front of this house and they're like, this is yours, go on inside. And this was my view from my window. That building is the Pines. It's the same building I just showed. And over on this grassy part is called the Knoll. That was another hangout spot, and there was a fire pit up there. And if you turned around, you could see the whole campus on top of the hill. And it was great. A beautiful viewing spot. Also a great viewing spot for stargazing. A lot of us would go out there at night and just hang out and gab, and it was a good time. Oh, I forgot. So speaking of waiting for the other shoe to drop, before I got there, just a few days before I got there, there was a horrible, horrible storm that knocked out power to the whole school, and it was knocked out for 2 days. So the school had to rush and get all these generators and make sure all the students were fed and safe. So yeah, luckily for me, the weather was like this the whole time I was there. I didn't have any problems to worry about. Now, I'm sure the folks who are watching from home and know about Penland are like, why did she pick this map? This is an outdated map. It doesn't have 2 or 3 of the buildings that I was in. But the reason I picked it is that it takes the whole campus and kind of squishes it onto one plane. And it's horseshoe shaped with all of the buildings on the outside of the horseshoe. And there's only one road in, one main road in, and one road out. all of the buildings at the top part of the map, they're on a hill. And then at the very entrance to the campus is the gallery in the bottom corner over there. And that's where all of the core fellowship students show their work. That's where the artists in residence show their work. And that's where a lot of visitors come to gather and see what is going on at Penland. It's a really beautiful facility. Okay, I like this picture because it shows one of the first historic buildings of the school. So I ended up bringing a book about the origins of Penland. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, just because that's how that goes. But this was one of the first buildings that they had when the school was founded, and it's the main administrative building. And I really like this picture because it kind of showcases a lot of the fog. We're in the middle of like a dip in a valley, and it was foggy like every single morning, and it made it spooky and fun. And yeah, so this is also a side view of the supply store, which is right here. Now this is kind of an integral part. It's like, why are you showing us the supply store? If we didn't have the supply store, we would have had to leave campus, and we are in the middle of nowhere. So that would have been a huge pain in the butt to leave campus just to get like a paintbrush or something. So they had a plethora of goods, not just that, but also like bug spray, umbrellas, stuff you might forget for your living arrangements. So I was very grateful that the store was there. Pardon me, I just need to get a bit of water. This is another view of the Pines. And this was their COVID setup. Normally we would all be eating indoors. But if you see at the very bottom, that's a sand pit. This was a volleyball area. But they set up these great event tents, so all of us were eating outside. And I honestly preferred it that way. You get your food, eat outside, and that was just a very natural place for everybody to talk and gather and get to know each other. And I just didn't really realize the prestige of the school. So many people came from all over the world to take classes there. One of the classmates I had, she's from Korea. People were from California, New York City, Maine, really just kind of all over the place, including local people who lived just 30 minutes away. So I'll give you a little bit of a tour of the facility. So this is the woodworking wood shop, the wood shop there. And there are all of these rooms off of the main room with woodworking equipment, lathes, saws, all that stuff. But I just couldn't believe how huge these studios were. At the time I was there, they were doing a chair caning class. And from what I understand, that's incredibly difficult and challenging to do because the reeds for the backing of the chair, they can be quite sharp. And if you see right up by this little bear, there are miniature models of the chairs. So I thought that was really cool. This was part of the fiber and textile studio. I'm not exactly sure what was going on with this workshop, but they were doing some sort of cyanotype nature printing. And I thought that was really interesting. When I walked in, there was dye all over the place. And there were these beautiful fabric squares with all of these great designs on them. So I just thought that was so cool, but I wasn't 100% sure what exactly they were doing. And then upstairs, the one floor up from this space, they were doing a sculptural felting class. So that was really cool as well. This was part of the clay studio. This was their outdoor kiln setup, and I got to walk by it every day. And the grounds were just so beautiful. I just had to take a picture of it. This was part of the letterpress studio, and this is what I would love to take if I ever go back there again. I would love to take a letterpress class. There were posters all over campus that students, past instructors have made, and I just thought it was so cool. They had these just absolutely everywhere. This is the glass studio. This is specifically the lamp work section. I've never done lamp work, but that would be pretty fun to do. And from what I understand, the artist that was teaching the class, it was a full class. This was one of the biggest groups that they had for the summer session that I was in. This is the iron studio, and it's so big. It's basically like half inside, half outside, just because of all of the heat and stuff that they have to do with all of these rooms off to the side. I didn't get a full tour of it, but it was pretty great to just kind of pop in and see what everyone was doing. And it's hard to tell in terms of scale with some of these pictures. These buildings are absolutely ginormous. So that's just another part of it. And they're all built on a hill and had to bring all the construction in one tiny road in and out. And I don't know how they did that. So let's get to my class. So on the end, I'll go from left to right, is Shanna. She is the instructor for the course. Mary Beth is next, along with Beth in the middle. She was actually the book and paper studio coordinator who just started that summer. And she was our like bonus classmate. She was, whenever she wasn't in meetings, she was always with us in class, just making bone folders. There I am. And then next is Anne. I'll explain Anne later. She's awesome. I'll explain all that later. And then there's Paul and his yogurt. Okay, this is Shanna's work. Her name is Shanna Leino. Shanna, if you're watching from home, I'm sorry if I'm butchering your last name. Apart from being just a really cool chick, she was also super nice and very helpful with our instruction. And I can't believe that she just does this for a living. It's just totally goals. But she lives in Michigan. She lives up, not in the UP, but just up. I don't remember where she said she lives. But that was a little bit serendipitous to find out when we both met. And I found out through other instructors. I'm like, oh, I'm taking the bone folder class. And they're like, with Shanna, she's like it. She's the person. She's the tool maker. So I really didn't understand that I was being taught by one of the best people until others were like, oh my God, she's here. That's her. So I thought that was really fun. And these are some samples of her work. In terms of scale, I understand that these are fairly small, like they could fit in your hand. Definitely check out her stuff. It's pretty interesting. So in terms of the making, I wanted to show the raw material versus the finished product. And you can see that the colors can vary a lot in terms of the bone material itself. They have, interestingly enough, they have a unique smell. It's not a gross smell. It's not a bad smell. It's just a smell. So you could tell immediately when you walked into the room that we just had a pile of bones sitting in the middle of the table. And this is all elk bone. And the process of it is the hunters take their kills to processing facilities where they're professionally butchered. And then the bones are essentially a waste product. They get thrown away. So if you're lucky enough to come by at the right time, you can save them and use them. Once you have them, though, you have to boil them, clean them, potentially bleach them in some cases. And boy, is that gross. I actually ended up doing it at home, and I don't think I'm ever going to do that again. It definitely was not a fun process. But we used elk bone specifically because of the density of the bone. And I didn't really understand, as a comparison, what that meant until I used a cow femur bone. And the density difference was crazy. Elk are wild animals, so they are constantly wandering from place to place, but a cow is not. So the cow bone was very fibrous. It had a lot of air pockets, so that was pretty interesting to compare the two. And I would prefer to use the elk bone if I do that in the future. Sorry, this picture is a little bit blurry, but I wanted to show just the variety of tools that you can make with the raw material. If you see, there's a spoon up there. The thing up close is a drop spindle. Shanna also made a sheath to a knife. I thought that was crazy cool. But that was the goal of the class, was to make a variety of tools specifically for what we needed, our needs. So we had a lot of freedom to just do whatever we wanted, which was the goal. And then the goal for the class was also to make this beautiful tool case to go with it. And that was all up to us what we wanted. Now, before I go to the next slide, Penland impressed upon us that safety was top priority. We were in the middle of nowhere, near a mountain. So they said, if you hurt yourself, say something immediately, because it'll take an ambulance 30 minutes to even get here, and then another 30 minutes to get you back to the hospital. So they said, please, please, please be very careful, but if you do hurt yourself, say something right away. So naturally, they gave me a hatchet right after that, and it was razor sharp. Luckily, nobody got hurt. Everyone was being great, paying attention. I did shred up my fingertips a lot, though, when it came to filing. But yeah, so I love this picture of Mary Beth because she is holding the hatchet properly, whereas I'm not. That's okay. And we use the hatchet to get rid of a lot of material to get a rough shape for the bone folder of what we have in mind. And a lot of people think that it's like a hack, that we're just hacking at it. No, it's like really short cuts and shavings to get the bone folder in a good workable spot. And it saves us hours of filing. It would have taken forever to hand file everything as opposed to just using the hatchet and cut off what we don't need. This is the filing process. If you see, I have a tennis ball on the very end of this very sharp rasp. That's what I cut all my fingertips on. And I'm pulling the bone toward me as a stable work surface. So instead of having the bone folder stable and filing around it, it was the other way around. I used the bone folder around the file. And that makes it a lot easier to shape. You also can see I'm wearing a mask, my Golden Girls mask. We were going to be wearing masks regardless of COVID anyway, because this process is incredibly dusty. The book studio had a really good layer of dust on everything when we were done by the end of the week. So we don't want to be breathing in any of that. And bone dust is also incredibly slippery because bones have natural oils in them. So again, with safety, we had to make sure we were wearing the proper shoes. We had to be extra careful not to slip, sweep up often so that we wouldn't fall. So Shanna mentioned not only the functional elements of the bone folder tools, but decorative elements as well. One of the things she showed us was how to carve a design into the bone and then put colored epoxy on top of it to then wipe it off later. This is Mary Beth's piece, and she ended up doing a really beautiful feather design, and I'll show you that in just a little bit. But this is the first step in that process. You slap all the epoxy on, and then you sand it away later. So this is one of the things we use for different engraving tools, not just files and rasps and things like that, but I'm using an etching tool for printmaking to carve designs into the bone folder. And we had this fancy schmancy thing called an engraver's vise. Apparently they use it to like engrave knives or guns or something to just keep it very steady. So we were using this cool engraver's vise to keep the bone folder steady. And then I'm also hand sewing the roll-up toolkit. And we tried to do as many things by hand as we possibly could. Some of it we did with like rotary tools. If you see in the bottom, that's a cutter down there. But we just tried to do as much by hand as possible. Another thing that was really important for us to do was to get to know our fellow classmates and fellow instructors. Something that they did, I think, every night after dinner was called slides. And normally that would have been done in person, just like this, giving a talk in front of a group of people. But for COVID restrictions, we were outside and we projected it up on a wall. And they were pre-recorded videos of the instructors talking about their work and about their practice. So they did about 3 instructors for each session every night. And that made for good hangout time, good snack time, just getting to know everybody. So that was pretty fun. Shanna was very smart and thoughtful and was like, okay, I hope you guys don't get crazy being in the studio all day long. So to break up our day, she organized studio tours with local artists in the area. And all of them have had some affiliation with Penland at one point or another. So this is Dan Essig's studio, and he is a book artist. And it was like walking into a cabinet of curiosities. He had all of these like specimen jars, bugs, rocks, really anything you can imagine. And what was nice about his studio and about him is that he was just he let us be very hands-on. So I'm like, oh, what's this? He's like, here, pick it up, look, inspect it, discover. So that was really nice of him to just let us completely rummage through all of his cabinet drawers. And I like this because it just shows a really gnarly book up in the corner with all the nails sticking out of it. It was definitely an experience to walk into his studio. Very cool. And then next we visited Courtney and John's studio. That was a husband and wife team. And they had their studios just in their backyard. So they were very nice and gave us a tour of the property and their studio spaces. This is Courtney's studio. She is a ceramicist. And this is John's studio. He's a glass blower. So it was crazy just to see that they had this just right in their backyard. You know, work's not very far away. And they built most of all of the stuff themselves. So that was also very impressive. They did have a shared gallery space on the second floor of the glass studio. And I mean, they're married, so it works. Their work shown together was a very nice combination. But yes, they were so nice and very gracious to just let us poke around and pick their brain and see what was going on. So when I mentioned the epoxy earlier, this is kind of one of the end results of that. This is Shanna's toolkit. She made this specifically for the annual auction that they have at Penland to support student scholarships. And this is just a really small toolkit, just 5 pieces, but it was totally beautiful. She was working on this the same time we were working on ours. And you can see you can have quite a lot of freedom with the designs you carve into the bone. And then putting different color of epoxy, you can kind of go totally crazy with that. It's very cool. And I couldn't believe the speed at which you can make these. I was only expecting to make about 4 bone folders. In the end, I made 11. So once you get going, you can really pump out a lot of them. Now this is Anne. Anne is crazy in a good way. That girl soaked up every second she had in the studio. She was often the first to get there and the last to leave at like 3 a.m. And she made the most out of everybody. She made this green toolkit, but also she made a second one for a friend. She just was working her butt off, making. And she did something that I thought was a little crazy, but super cool. She saved all of the dust from each bone folder. So those are the piles of dust that each piece created. And I thought that was so clever and so smart. And just to see the different color variations of even the dust was fascinating. Oh, and then this one right in the bottom corner here, she just up and ran to the supply store and ripped a bunch of stuff apart and gave it bone handles. So she did this with awls. She did it with a palette knife. She even made, I don't know if you can see that really tiny piece over there. She made a scoring bone folder for like ceramic slip. So that was wild. And if you're watching from home, you're crazy in a good way. This was like our show and tell. The Penland hosts something called Studio Stroll at the end of every session. You go from studio to studio to see what all of the students made over their workshop. And unfortunately, I was not able to do that. I had to catch my flight back home. So we did our own form of studio stroll right outside our studio and just did a little bit of show and tell. And a lot of folks stopped by. They heard we were going to do it, and they just came to inspect our work. And that was very encouraging. Everyone was very open to sharing. Everyone was very open to testing out what we made and seeing all of it. So that was great. This is Mary Beth's work. If you see right in the center, that's that feather design. Once you shave away all of the extra epoxy, and I thought it turned out just beautiful. She made a lot of work too. She was really rocking and rolling. And what I love that detail up in the corner of her roll-up tool case to make it a little extra pop of color, but also to tie in literally the other bone folder up at the top. And she was just great to work with. I'm very, very glad I got to meet her. This is Paul's work. I didn't label it because he labeled it himself. My two favorite pieces are the face in the middle, and then the piece on the bottom is a design of the knoll, the hangout spot. And he spent a lot of time getting the fire going. He's a woodworker, so his transition from working with wood to working with bone was pretty seamless. But yeah, he was making away, and I loved the work that he produced. So this is my stuff. I ended up making 11 pieces while I was there. And the only one that isn't elk bone is the one all the way down on the end with that little rivet in it. We also practiced adding in rivet elements to the bone folders as well. That is buffalo bone, but all of the rest are elk bone. And this is a view with the tool case. And that is what it looks like all rolled up. And again, we hand punched everything. We're sewing it and hand riveted all of it. So all of it was very hands-on. These are my two favorite pieces. The one over here is an awl, and then the one over there, I tried to make it look like a fox, but a lot of people said it looked like a cat or a Batman. I'm fine with either of those, to be totally honest. And had a lot of fun doing that. And the awl, I'm not gonna lie, freaked me out because I was so scared I was gonna get stopped at the airport. There's no way they were gonna let me on the plane with that. And I was afraid they were going to confiscate it because they had never seen something that looked like that. So Shanna was very, very kind and offered to help mail it back to my house so that it would not get confiscated at the airport. This is just another view of that all. And I ended up making a burnishing ring. I have pretty small hands, so it fits my hands pretty well. But one side is very rounded and smooth. So I use that for burnishing different elements in bookbinding. And I'm very lucky to have supportive family and friends that don't necessarily question the weird things that I do, but instead support me. So after I came back from Penland and told everyone I went to bone camp, my uncle just up and gave me a cow femur. He's like, "Here, can you use this?" I'm like, "Sure, yeah, definitely." And I had a family friend who was a hunter give me some of the bones he had from one of his hunts. So that was great. And they just don't question why I'm weird. They just support me that I'm weird. So this is one of those jaw bones that I received from my family friend. And I had a blast making this one. The teeth were very sharp, so I had to file them down. But you're welcome to come and pick them up in a little bit. But I definitely wanted to make sure it fit really well in hand. So I took all those factors in mind when making extra bone folders. This was another one I made. The front teeth fell out, but I ended up using that to my advantage and kind of made it a natural dip for where your hand would naturally go. And I did make a few more. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to photograph them before today, but they will be going on my website shortly. And that's that. Thank you for listening to the Bone Lady. I would highly encourage you to check out Penland's website. They have a lot of interesting classes to offer. And also check out the websites of my fellow classmates from my workshop. They make amazing work. I was very lucky to work with them. So please check out their stuff. After questions, you are more than welcome to come up and hold the bone folders. We do have hand sanitizer if you maybe want to wipe your hands off when you're done holding them. That's right on the end there. But does anyone have any questions? If not, yes.
The woman who saved all of the bone dust, did she use it for something, or was it just to see how much had like accumulated from making the tools?
Yeah, I'm going to repeat the question for the folks at home. The question is, what did Anne do with the dust when she was done with it? I asked her the same thing, and she said, "I don't know yet." So I assume she used it. It really could be used for anything. You could mix it with epoxy and do something. You could put it in your garden, fertilize the flowers. I don't know what she did with it, but I think it was also to see, how much dust was left over, which was pretty interesting. I'm glad she did that. Do you have a question?
Yeah. You kind of touched on it a little bit. Did the form of the bone inspire your end result, or did you go in with each one kind of thinking, this is what I kind of want to do with this?
Yeah, the question is, did the shape of the raw material influence the end design? Yeah, it definitely did. I had an idea in my head for, okay, maybe if I want a really skinny bone folder, I'll get a smaller piece and just kind of work with what I've got. Or I would look at a piece of bone and be like, ooh, I know exactly what I'm going to make from this piece. And with the gnarly looking awl that I made, that was the case for that. I'm like, oh, I would love to make an awl out of the bottom end of a bone. I think that would be really cool. But yeah, it was a little bit of both, give and take. Any other questions? Yeah.
Do you know where Penland get the elk bones from?
Yeah, the question is, where did the elk bones come from? The coolest way I could put it is Shauna has a bone dealer. A guy will just go to the processing facilities and just dumpster dive, I guess. I mean, it's destined for the garbage anyway, but he would just grab it and clean it. And he sells the pieces pre-cut, so they're a little bit more workable. But you could also do that yourself if you don't have a bone dealer. You can do it yourself. Any other questions, comments? No? All righty. Well, thank you all for listening to me. Thanks for coming.